The best part is I always tell people, like, and this is for whoever's watching, whatever men are out there watching, even if they're struggling with whether it's identity or who they are as a man or just who they naturally are. I always tell people, God made me a man. I don't have to prove it to anybody.
There you go. There you go. What's up, guys? Welcome to the Salty Podcast, where we're talking about being the salt while drinking some tea. Today, we have a very special episode. We have Mr. Quentin here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Mr. Walk with humility, walk with grace, walk with peace. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Quentin, I'm so glad you're here, man. I'm so grateful to have you here. I hope this is going to be a good time, man. But before we get started, is like you want to introduce yourself to the people, like who you are?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Quentin. Trying to think about, it's hard to think about the interesting things about yourself.
Right.
So I was born and raised here in Virginia.
Okay.
Went to high school here. I like to say that I had a pretty anticlimactic life. I'm joking. I usually am like the person that everybody comes to and talks to because they're calm. But I was also in the Navy for 7 years. Okay. And so after that, I just got out, worked, and so now I'm going to Regent. And a little late, a little mid-life, but you know how that goes. You know how
education doesn't stop.
It doesn't, and so you know how that ends up working out. And so it's been a beautiful thing, and just taking life by the...
That's what's up, man. That's what's up. I'm glad. Again, education doesn't stop. I encourage people, like, at the same time, while I encourage people to go to school at a young age, it's like, if you're interested in learning it, you have the time, you know what I'm saying? Go ahead and learn what you want to. Yeah. But today, transition to today's episode. Today, Quentin, I know when I was talking to you about the podcast, it was on your heart to talk about this topic. Yeah. And I want to talk about, we both want to talk about the importance of what it means to be a man of God. Yeah. And how sometimes in our current generation that is very skewed, is misrepresented, and people don't understand necessarily what it means to be a man of God. Yeah. And what that looks like. So again, this episode is open for everybody. Absolutely. So everybody has something to learn. All right. But it's definitely focusing on making sure that we have an understanding of what it means to be a man of God. And so before we do that, before we dive into that, Quentin, I want to ask you a question about where do you think men stand in our current generation? Where do you see our current generation of men, and where do you think we're at?
I definitely think that we are a little confused sometimes. Okay. That sometimes we don't know necessarily where to insert ourselves or how to insert ourselves, or really honestly what the characteristics of a man really is, or what the makings of a man really is. Yeah. There's so many things out here that we feel like we have to prove to people. Yeah. And so I definitely think that people are really all over the place. Like men are the state of men, like it's all, like we're all over the place.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think the state of men, I think it's heavily on, social media plays a huge part. Absolutely. Upbringing plays a huge part with the fact that, we live in a generation of, a lot of broken families, a lot of people who don't have fathers. And at the same time, even the people sometimes who do have fathers aren't necessarily Christian, don't, raise the kids right. And I think a lot of that has been misrepresented. So as we transition on to this question, who do you think God called us to be as men? You know what I'm saying? Who do you think we're supposed to be?
Yeah. First and foremost, I believe that he naturally created us as leaders, leaders of our families, as leaders in anything that we do, and taking that. And I think that people have such a misconstrued vision of leadership. They see it as like perfect, the person that always has the answer. And I don't really think that that's necessarily leadership. I think that as I see it now, and as I've learned to see it, like I've looked like through the Beatitudes, and I've seen like this guy named Chris Harper. He has like this series, and I've went through it, and it's opened up my eyes to even like, oh dang, I don't even have to guess this character. Like I don't even have to guess what I have to do, but it's just more so in the realm of like always surrendering yourself to God. Like that's really what a a man really should be. Is always surrendering to God so that he gives him that input.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think, what it means to be a man, like when we look at biblically, when we look at Adam, it's the most important thing that I'm learning as a man. One of the most important things to first have to be a man is, do you have a relationship with God?
Absolutely.
And what I mean by that is, I'm not talking about masculinity. I'm not talking about being tough. I'm not talking about that. It's, do you know your creator? Do you know who God even made you to be? You know what I'm saying? So when we look at Adam, we look at the relationship that Adam had with God. The most important thing was Adam walking with God in the cool of the day.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? And so I feel like sometimes we live in a generation that doesn't stress that. You know what I'm saying? It stresses the thing of, I need to have it all together. Absolutely. I need to always be strong. I can't be phased.
Absolutely.
When your first priority in life is first just to spend time with him.
Absolutely.
Right? And so why do you think there's a lack of that in our generation? Why do you think people feel like they need to put on this whole, I got it all together, I can't even let my bros know if I'm struggling with stuff? Like, why do you think that is?
Bro, I really think that we've become each other's competition, and we haven't started to use each other as resources. Until we really see that I'm not your, like, think about how much you have, think about how much I have. And it's not for us to sit here and give each other the highlights of life, which is good. Like, it's good to celebrate each other, but the low moments are really where we relate most of the time. Where both of us probably have way more in common. And so I think that surrendering part is, we don't see ourselves as really needing help or really needing the thing. We see ourselves as the, like, means to the end. And that's draining.
That's a dangerous place to be.
That's dangerous.
Wow. You said something that we see ourselves as a means to our end when we're not. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's a good point where, you're stressing the fact that we're not in competition with each other. Like, I think people need to, men especially, as you're, saying earlier, it's leadership, right? We're called to be the head of the household, not in a way of, I think society twists it so wrong of what they believe that it's all about being a man. And it's like, no, when God says a man's the head of a household, it's not a dictatorship. You know what I'm saying? It's not anything where it's like you're putting down the wife. You don't care about the wife's opinion. It's like, that is the complete opposite of the way God orchestrates. It's when you look at, the Bible says husbands shall love their wives the way Christ loved the church. And what did Christ do for the church? He died for the church. Absolutely. So the people who are like, men are supposed to be this, this, and this, and don't care about women, it's like, that's not what God says. You know what I'm saying? And so I think with men, we have to have a better understanding of who God called us to be. So along with that, I want to talk about, do you think broken families plays a lot of what, we see our struggles nowadays?
Yes and no.
Okay. Dive into that. Yes and no.
Yeah, yes and no. I say it because I do think that fathers have such a huge role to play. And so I do think that them being there is absolutely the preferred method that the Lord had in mind. And I see that even in my own situation and in my own, like with my own father, and how, that looks different. And I'm seeing now, like, there's a lot of holes in who I am now as a man, and even in just how I even submit to God, even sometimes. Like, it's really hard for me to get to a certain place with the Lord because loving fathers is not something that I've experienced. And so I definitely think that it plays a role there. But also I've seen fathers present, and their presence actually really confusing the generation that comes up after them, their children, and just people that they're called to lead. And so really it's again that leadership portion, like, so the lack of or the abuse of it is either way.
Well, I'll say this, I haven't fully thought of it sometimes in that perspective, and I think that's a very good perspective because I think it encourages people that at the end of the day, a situation isn't hopeless. Right? So no matter what you go through, the scripture says all things work for the good of those that love God. So if you love God and you weren't, able to have a loving father, he is your loving father. And so to me, when we talk about father, so my experience, right, I was blessed to have, to me in my eyes, the best father that I could have ever had. My dad passed away 2 years ago, I think 2021. Wow. But to me, the testimony he left me, it's like I'm forever grateful, in awe, and in gratitude of what he did for my life.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've learned in life is the biggest blessing that I think, because I don't have a kid.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not a father yet, but God willing, one day.
Yeah.
But the one thing I learned is the biggest responsibility a father has is to point the child to God.
Absolutely.
If you do that, everything else is fine.
Absolutely.
And so I want to encourage people, like, the biggest thing a man can do, right, along with the father, whatever role you have, is can you point people to Christ, right? Because if there are people who don't have fathers, if there are people who don't have mothers or have a good standard in life, you have to help them see the standard. You have to help them see who God is and what God says, you know? I have a lot of like young people, and like I consider them my little brothers and all this stuff around me, who not necessarily have good father figures and all this stuff. And I tell them, because y'all know Christ, y'all can now reset. Y'all can now reset and be the example to the next generation. So let God be your father, right? Like you said, some people might not have a loving father, but God says he is love, right? He is. And so how do you think people can, you know, people who struggle with, you know, not having a father, or people who have a struggle of what a man looks like, how do you think they can approach the throne room, and how do you think they can approach God with their struggle? How do you think they should do that?
I think that the best part is, I always tell people, like, and this is for whoever's watching, whatever men are out there watching, even if they're struggling with whether it's identity or who they are as a man, or just who they naturally are. I always tell people, God made me a man. I don't have to prove it to anybody.
There you go. There you go.
And so that takes that away. And so really approaching God to say, like, God, you made me, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. You made me this way. So whether I have a gentle voice, whether I have a soft-spoken voice, whether I like sports or whether I don't like sports, you made me this way, and you made me beautiful, and you perfected it. Not only did you make, like, you perfected it, and you are continuing to perfect me. And so really coming to him in that boldness of just, hey, God, you didn't create a mistake. You didn't,
go ahead, bro. Go ahead.
You didn't create me in this situation as a mistake. And so really dealing with that insecurity of, like, why am I here? Who got me here? Like, why am I not like the others? Like, he made you your own carbon copy. And he made you with his glory and with his breath inside of you for a purpose, the way that you are.
Yeah, and I think again, bro, you're dropping facts and you're dropping heat, and I want to encourage people. Yeah, God doesn't make mistakes. So whatever that doubt the enemy tries to put in your mind about, you know, the where you are and all this stuff is, like, that's not godly. We're all children of God, and I think one of the most things I want to encourage men and encourage guys to know is you are loved. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
I think we live in a generation where it doesn't. Guys just don't understand what it means to be loved. You know what I'm saying?
They don't.
And it's weird. You know, it's a weird.
And it's like thing. They want it from. It's like we want to, like, put that love load sometimes on one person. So whether it's we get in a relationship, or whether it's our moms, or whether it's we want to put that on one person, when really that the wealth should be spread out amongst a community of people.
No, and you're absolutely right. It's like. It's so funny to think about, like, just right now in my mind, I'm just like, why do men struggle so much at receiving love? And you're right. It's like that it shouldn't be placed on one person. And it's like the irony of we struggle receiving love, but the world expects us to give a lot of love. You know what I'm saying? And biblically, we know we only love because he loved us first. Absolutely. So I want to encourage people, if you don't know what it means to experience the love of God, that is priority.
It is.
That will help you, like Quentin saying, is have an identity. Absolutely. Have security of knowing who you are. It's because when you get into his presence, and I was telling one of my friends recently, is like, you need to know who you are in him. You need to know who you are in the eyes of your creator. You're going to females, you're going to all this stuff. It's like, bro, that's not going to help you out.
Every time, like, a young man asks me, I just had a few young men ask me, like, what should I do before I get in a relationship? And I say, make sure that you stand for something. Because if you don't stand for something, you're going to fall, and you're going to fall into whatever the world tells you that you are. And so get to those things and ask about your character. Like, if you're struggling with something, make sure that you vocally say it from your mouth, like that, and you confess these things and you get these things out there, so they're not sitting in and festering and you're ashamed of them. But it's okay. Like we don't like ask to struggle with stuff. We like I don't wake up in the morning and say like, hey God, I want to struggle with X, Y, and Z today. But they're just natural struggles, and the more we get them out, and the more we have conversations like this, and we even have relationships like this where we can come and say, bro, I've been struggling, or this. You didn't wake up that morning and was like, hey, God, all the struggles, I want them, and I want to brave them today.
And I want to stress on this because I'm thinking about this. It's like I want to encourage people to think about eternity. Yeah. And what I mean by that is that will help you view a better point what God wants a man to be. Yeah. Right? Because like Quentin saying, is like it's not about competition. Yeah, it's not. It's about community. Yeah. It's about building each other up. It's about helping each other in our weaknesses. Because in eternity, guys, what's the competition about? Nothing. People who wants to compete is like, is this going to matter? Nothing. 20 years from now?
We can all fit.
Right. We can all fit. It's like the story is bigger than us. Yeah. The story is about love.
It is.
It's about salvation.
It is.
It's about the fact that we know we are sinners, right? Yeah. So even though we live in a generation where like, I'm tough and all this stuff, I'm not saying don't work out, but I'm saying it's walking with humility. Absolutely. Right? Walking with the fear of the Lord. And I want to encourage people. It's like Quentin is saying, a man is defined by what God says a man is. Yeah. And so I want to encourage people. It's like, if you are struggling to have identity issues, or if you are struggling with, feeling like you are enough, or, all this stuff is, you have to get into the Word of God. You have to know what God says about you and who He's called you to be. Yeah. Not for society, but for your own self of knowing where you are. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? To know what it means to be a son of a king. I like it. To know what it means that God's called us to be kings, right? So what does a king mean? A king means a protector, a provider, a person who cares for the people around them, is willing to sacrifice himself, But at the same time, a king also means you're the best one there is, right? A king is supposed to be the best swordsman, is supposed to be the wisest person, is supposed to be the one who makes the decisions. So are you even allowing God to cultivate those things in you? We're talking about these things to be a man. Yeah. We're not spending time with him.
To be trustworthy.
Yeah, to be trustworthy. It's like, I really want to encourage people. It's like, find brotherhood. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Quentin, do you think there's a lack of brotherhood nowadays? Or, what do you think about that?
I think it is. I think, again, that it goes back to that competition piece. I think that we let people but so close. Yeah. We don't really let them into our, and that's something that intentionally I've been trying to do this season and in my own life, is intentionally let people into my space. Like the space that I feel like, no, I'm not letting anybody into there. Yeah. But really letting people into those places, because God can't deal with anything that we don't open up. Mm. And so most of the stuff that we're dealing with is trapped behind the mess. Mm. And so we can't get to the mess unless we really want to climb over the stuff. Yeah. And so sometimes we need help climbing through it. And so I think that a lot of us mask it, put it in the closet, and we invite people over and we're like, oh, the house is clean. But really, instead of being like, hey, I actually need help cleaning the stuff out. Yeah. And that's what, and we have to be available for stuff like that as well. We have to be available to these calls. Like, people are going to deal with heavy stuff. People are going to tell us some stuff that we probably actually don't even know how to handle it. Yeah. And that's all okay.
Yeah, it is. And along with what he's saying, I want to encourage people. There's a story in the Bible about 4 friends who brought a paralytic friend to Christ, and when they weren't allowed to get in there, they broke the roof. Yeah. Right. And so I listened to one of my friends talk about it once. Is like how we talk about the friend who is paralyzed, but we don't sometimes look at the faith of the friends. Yeah. Are you a friend to other people that you had the faith to bring them to Christ? That's a big one. And so it's like in brotherhood, the guys you have around you, the people you have around you, are you one of the people, when you see your brother struggling, you're like, I'm going to take you to the rooftop. Yeah. I'm going to break open the roof so that you can get the miracle that you need. Yeah. And so like you said, it's not a competition, guys. Because what are we competing with?
It goes to it's kind of like what you just said. I give this analogy all the time. In the Navy, there's this ethos that we have. It's one team, one fight. And at first, when I was younger, I was like, I don't understand this. Like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Like, why am I getting in trouble for something that everybody else is doing? Until I recently, and the Lord like recently showed me, like, if it's like running a race, and say if like me and you are running a race, and I see you fall back there, and you're like in the ground, like on the ground, like hurting, and I'm just like, well, I'm focused on finishing this race and winning this race so that I can get to the finish line. But what better of a win is it to pick your brother up and run across the finish line, and like together, and that's a win for both of you guys versus just like, I mean, they'll figure it out.
Yeah, I think along with that, it's stressing that being a man of God does not mean being alone. No. Right? It's completely the opposite. It's surrounding yourself with people who are all winning. Yeah. Because what is the point of winning and you're alone? Absolutely. Right? Like, you see many people who are successful and they don't have people they can trust. They don't have a good like foundation around them. Yeah. And what is the point of that, right? Nothing. So I want to encourage people. It's like, be the brother that you're called to be so your whole team's winning. I tell my friends a lot of time, once one of us makes it out the hood, we all making it out. Right?
I love that.
Because like, and the reason is, it's like, it's only in community, like not only in community, but in community by the grace of God, there's so much joy when you see somebody else winning. Yeah. Right. It's not about me. And sometimes me winning means I see you winning. Yeah. That's when I find like, no, like, you got it. You know what I'm saying? And the reason for that is, I think it all comes back down to this of understanding your identity. Yeah. When you know how much God loves you. Yeah. You understand everything else isn't about that proof of, am I still loved? Absolutely. It's, I'm loved. Yeah. I'm going to get what God wants me to get. Yeah. Along with that, when I see somebody else beside me happy, I'm like, I'm glad you're getting what you know what I'm saying? So in brotherhood, it's like, once we are secure ourselves, you'll enjoy seeing everybody else win, because because they're winning, that doesn't mean you're not winning. Yeah. God still got me. Yeah. You know, I hold to this a lot, and I always say this, man, as a joke, but it's like, I'm God's favorite. Yeah. To me, I'm God's favorure.
Yeah. And you should. Like, we're resources. That's why I say we're not individual chain links. We're links to a chain that we're stronger together. Yeah. And so where I'm not strong, you're probably strong. Yeah. And if we link it together, we have so much more coverage in the kingdom than we do separately together.
And I want to encourage this, talk about this, because in reality, people confuse being individualistic versus what reality is. Yeah. What I mean by that is, if somebody wants to play basketball, right, no matter what the person feels, it's 5 against 5. Mm-hmm. So if you want to do 1 against 5, that 5 is not changing. Yeah. They're going to keep their 5. Yeah. So we got to think about the bigger picture of the battlefield. The enemy is always going to attack strategically in the way he is doing. If you want to do it by yourself or with the team, you're going to still fight the same opponent.
You're still going to fight the same one.
So in that, it's the thing of knowing that you work as a team better. Like you said, you help with each other's weaknesses. Yeah. Where I fall short, you be stronger. And so it's like Christ called us to be a body. The same time a body holds a hand, a foot, a heart, a brain. Yeah. And so it's like, we're like, nah, I just want to be a foot. I'm going to be a foot by myself. It's like, what's the point of a foot without the rest of the body? Yeah. So I want to encourage people. It's like, learn to know that your brothers around you or the people around you are there with love. Yeah. Surround yourself, of course, with the good people around you, and like people who build you up. Yeah. So I want to transition to this last thing. Is like, how do you think a person can better themselves as a man, right? In our generation, what do you think are a few practical things that men need to work on and that men need to get better?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, definitely just surrendering to God, like a place of surrender. Yeah. Like, even I told you everything that I've been going through. Yeah. Like, one of the biggest things that the Lord has even like brought out of this is just not my ability to even just necessarily come to him, but to surrender to him the stuff, like the everything of life, like that responsibility, because even though it feels like the responsibility does fall on us as a man, the Lord gives us the instruction to do this. And so if we're relying on ourselves, we're going to really just mess it up. And so I would say definitely that, and just really learning one by one, like learning to open up and be honest. Be honest about life. Like that's a huge thing. There's so many things that, again, me and you are probably going through that are way similar to each other. And don't get me wrong, it's good to talk about things that like sports or anything.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
For the most part, we don't really even have that in common. Like that's really the cover up,
surface level,
the surface level of everything.
Yeah.
Everybody else lives in it. I love that. Like, there's another analogy. This guy says that the depth is for you and God. But the shallow is where everybody else lives. And so sometimes in the stuff that, like, hey, maybe I have, maybe I'm working on my words. Maybe I'm working on like my relationships with other people. Maybe I'm working on just a lot of different things, like character building things. Like maybe I'm working on being trustworthy. Maybe I'm working on all of these things. And so really, just getting that vulnerability to come to people that know that you trust. Like are we friends if I really don't trust you with my stuff? Yeah.
And I think you're hitting it on. And I think one thing I want to say, as Quentin's saying about opening up, I want to encourage people to really know what it means to love God and to be loved by God. And what I mean by that is you have to know where you stand, right? And if I have this thing where I don't sometimes get why men feel like they have to hold back from God. Because the irony is he knows either way. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And what I'm trying to say is it's like learn to let God have everything. Yeah. Like we don't have to feel like I got to be strong all the time. I got to take this battle. No, our battles belong to him. Yeah. Right. Our main priority in life is to be his children. Yeah. Right. To be a son, to run to the Father, to sit beside the Father, to sit in the throne room, and to be us. There's a thing in I don't know if you saw this movie called Dune. Yeah. Right, where Timothée Chalamet is talking to his dad, and then his dad talks about how his dad used to do stuff. Right? Yeah. And then I think Timothée Chalamet was talking about, like, what if I don't want to be king? Yeah. Right? And then his dad says, that's fine. I don't need you to be that. Yeah. Because you're my son. That's good. And so I think we live in a generation that doesn't know how to be vulnerable in the presence. And I'm saying, at the end of the day, eternity is about a relationship between you and him. Yeah. Right? And he loves you more than anybody else ever could. Yeah. Right? And so I pray that the men in our generation understand how much love that is. Yeah. It's not a facade. It's not anything that we have to put a show in. It's like God genuinely loves you more than anybody ever else could, and he died for you. And so I want to encourage men on knowing what it means to be a son, because in actuality, when we are born, that's the first thing we are. Yeah. Right? Yeah. The moment we're given life, we're a son. Yeah. And so I want to encourage people of knowing what it means in the eyes of God to be a son. Yeah. And be vulnerable as a son and all this stuff. So I think this was an amazing conversation, Quentin. Yeah. I thank you so much for coming here.
No, I appreciate you for having me.
I think you dropped crazy things about, I think, stuff men needed to hear, you know, especially Christian men. I think it's a lot of stuff that Christian men needed to hear about our generation. So again, Quentin, thank you so much, man.
Thank you. No, thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. All of Quentin's social media is going to be in the description below, guys. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Leave some comments, subscribe, like. Let us know what y'all think and what y'all think men should look like, what men should do in society. So again, thank you so much for watching the Salty Podcast, where we talk about salt, where we talk about being the salt while drinking some tea. Today we got water. Peace out.
See you.